So I'm going to get started. For those of you that don't know me, I think almost everybody does. I'm Rob Pasick, and this is Leaders Connect Breakfast. It's been going for 20 years, all of that on Zoom. We go way back. No, I'm serious. We used to do it at Zingerman's Roadhouse. So we all miss that, but I think it's going to be a little bit of a while till we get 100 people in Zingerman's Roadhouse room and sitting tight with each other. I was telling people I was at Tiger game yesterday, opening day, and things were really spread out. There were 8,000 people all over the stadium, and we had to go through like three different screenings to get in. And then we watched the game in the snow, and
Oh,
it was nice because the Tigers scored a touchdown, so that was really good. But today we're going to talk about I think, a really interesting topic, and that's how to integrate your goals and integrate mind, body, spirit through physical activity. And we have some great stories to tell. And I'm very excited to get this going. I just want to make a couple announcements. One is that on April 30th, we have Thomas Zerbuchen, Professor Thomas Zerbuchen, Dr. Thomas Zerbuchen, and he is leading the Mars expedition right now. So today or yesterday, they're going to fly a helicopter on Mars. And he is at NASA and is one of the leads of this expedition. So he's going to be showing us a lot of film and talking to us about his experience doing that. He's a good friend of mine, was at the University of Michigan for a long time. I'm sure several of you know him. Just an amazing story. And so that's April 30th. And then I'm planning on, I think it's April 16th. I don't know. I've got to get the date, but I'm planning a CEO event, which is just for people who are running organizations, and it's going to be about preparing for what's coming in the past pre area where we've had COVID, so post COVID area, and I want to work with the executives about what they're doing to plan for that. Some people say it's going to be the roaring 20s and things are going to be amazing and fantastic. But the workplace is going to be changed dramatically with people working from home, people working all over the world. And I think a lot of people are excited about that opportunity. How many of you do anticipate that you'll continue to work from home? Okay, very much so. And a lot of people have already done that, but it's going to be a lot of fun. I think we're all going to have to go to the coffee shops to gather. So my favorite is Morgan in York, and well, I'll see you all there soon. Victoria, you'll have to come into town and join us sometime.
I'd love that.
Okay. I'm going to start out with a little bit of story about what we're talking about, how to bring these goals together. So I'm going to talk one about the goal of walking. And I'm part of several groups, and one of them has a person in the group who's struggling with some physical problems. And he needs to walk for his physical health and also for his mental health, which is being affected by this condition. And so one of the guys said, well, why don't we walk together every Saturday morning? And one of the guys in the group actually owns a coffee shop, Argus Farm Stop. And so we have been walking. I'm not walking quite as far because I've got some conditions too, which don't enable me to walk 3.5 miles like they're doing. But I join them, and so we join at Argus Farm Stop. So here's one goal that we have of walking and getting exercise, and it's integrated with another goal of supporting people that we have at a value, supporting people in our group. It's integrated with another goal of the group gathering and building community, building connection with one another. So, and there's other things we get out of it because we share business ideas. People make connections and think about ways they might work together or help each other's companies. So one activity, walking, has grown into at least four important areas of our life in terms of our mind is stimulated by feeling good about connecting, talking about ideas. Our body obviously is working because we're walking. Our minds are our body, our mind, our spirit is working because we're helping other people and we're reaching out in terms of people in need. And I guess there's a fourth area that we're out in a beautiful area. He lives in Burns Park. And so when we're walking, we have a really pretty view of spring coming and looking at the flowers and all that. So that's another connection that is made through this activity. So that's an example of what I mean by connecting mind, body, and spirit through the things that we love to do and the goals that we set for each other. So that's what we're going to be talking today. And you're going to all have an opportunity to talk about this yourself in small groups that we're going to break out in about a half an hour. But I want to hand things over to the hat man, Steve Angerman, who has a room full of hats and is under orders from his wife that he brings in one more hat. He's got to dismiss two. So he has a hat for every day of the month, every day of the year, I should say. And that's really exciting. How many Kansas City Chiefs hats do you have?
Oh, we don't want to go there because that's deep, but definitely enough to get me through a season or two.
Okay, that's
part of it. Those of you that have collections of anything, once you get in your 60s, and if you've kept your collection going for your life, I mean, I literally do have hats that I got in high school. So you don't have to add too many each year to get this enormous collection of things. So the trouble is,
I think Britany has a question for you about how you choose these. Britany, you want to say your question?
How do you choose which two of your children to chuck to bring in a new one?
Oh, that's tough.
Is your wife online today, Steve? I don't know if you could be honest or
no,
not.
she does a Zoom yoga on
Okay, all right.
On Friday mornings. So she'll watch this though, so I have to be careful because she'll watch it when you put it out on Monday. But yeah, how do I choose? It's if somebody, like this week, a Michigan basketball hat, may want to put that one in the to-go pile for get a new one next season, bring them a little more luck. But anyway, that was a great example, Rob, that you were sharing about the walking group, and because it really does give that example of how you can mesh our goals together to create a larger sum. And that's what we're going to kind of talk about today. Also, how when we look at a collection of our goals, where they intersect, and by looking at that intersection or that sweet spot, so to speak, we can learn a little bit more about ourselves, about our passions, and where we want to go in life. Again, by looking at all the goals. So one of the requirements is you have to have more than one goal. And so this morning, Britany and Eileen and Rob and I are going to share some of the ideas and give you some examples and stories of how we've experienced personal achievements and some aha moments and such in our lives by integrating goals and by addressing this idea of serving our mind, our body, and our spirit. And that term spirit is kind of a different meaning to everybody. Sometimes it alludes to someone's faith or religion, but I like to look at it as to think of our core values, or that inner voice, what's important to us, however we got there, however those were created in yourself. That's kind of what we're talking about. For those of you that have been in this series, this being sort of the third one of talking about goals, we talked about the SMART goals, the habits of developing specific and measurable, attainable, realistic goals that are time-based. And we've been, first one, we looked at work and career goals, and then we were looking at goals for our fitness and wellness, and those kind of personal goals that way. And I look at those two first categories that we talked about. If you think about it, those are kind of our mind and our body, like goals that are about work, about a promotion, or goals about learning a new skill like a language or play guitar or whatever. Those are kind of mind goals. And then this idea of having goals like Rob's talking about going out and walking, sometimes that's for health, to lose weight. Some of us have goals that we just want to run a half marathon, or we want to learn to row. We want to do triathlons. So there's a lot of reasons why that get us there. But those are, I look at goals for our body, so that's what we're serving. So we got these mind goals, we got these body goals, and then, but what about the spirit? Where does that fall in? And so as we were talking about this, and as a group, I was thinking about that the term came up that I'm sure we've all heard, especially if you watch sports, because that's where you hear this phrase of somebody being in the zone. And often that's, they're using that term when when everything's going an athlete's way or a team's way, that they're in the zone. But you also hear this about musicians, artists, writers, basically anybody that's, in the spirit of practicing something, that they're in an activity, that you just kind of get in that zone. And I like to think of that zone as kind of where effort and time just kind of melt away, and you are really just focused on being rather than doing. You're just sort of in it right then, and you're not aware of what's happening around you. And so when I have had that experience, I kind of think of that as that's being in the zone. And that's kind of what I look at as being a spiritual goal. And I definitely have, as a runner, as a lot of you know, I've been running for most of my life, almost 50 years. And I definitely have had that experience as a runner. And say the goal might have been for that day to run 10 miles. But often when I get in that zone, at the end, I've learned something about myself, or maybe I've discovered a solution to some other goal that I was working on in my life. And it just sort of came to me because I got into this groove or this state. In full disclosure, as much as I love running, and I was in the running business, or I guess I still am, because I put on a lot of races. This doesn't happen on every run. So those of you that are just starting or interested, yeah, that doesn't always happen, but when it does, it's sweet. And I'm sure some of you know what I'm talking about, and maybe you felt it in other activities, like I mentioned. Maybe even in work, we can, what we're doing for our careers, we can kind of get in that groove. It could be a teacher in getting that, cooking, cleaning a building, whatever, we find that. So I look at that as kind of as that's my sort of definition of what a spiritual goal is. And I'll give you an example, kind of like what Rob was talking about. So a few years ago, I started doing yoga. And my goal for doing yoga was really just to be more flexible and to improve some strength, core strength, and balance, so that I wouldn't have so many nagging injuries that we get when we're in our 60s trying to still run and bike and kayak and such. So that was my motivation. But as I got in it, I found once I was learning, I took classes, and once I sort of learned the positions and the movement and the flow of it, I do it by myself now. And I started, especially when I do it by myself, I find myself kind of getting in that zone a little bit with the yoga. And so then I started figuring out, well, how do we get to that spot? And I came up with this idea, and I will call it is a yoga term. I'll call it an intent or an intention. And I look at that as sort of the goal, the SMART goal, all crammed into one period. So it's still, specific and measurable and attainable, and it's time, and the time is right now. And so, so at the end, you'll know whether you achieve the goal or not. So this example I have, a few weeks ago, I'd been talking to my son, and I was thinking about, he was going some issues, that he was working on as he's preparing for the LSAT. And I started thinking about I was trying to be a good father, and I was thinking about the men in my life. So I made this intent. I went to do my yoga, and I made this intent that I was going to think and concentrate about the men in my life that had had an influence, and how they had been important to me, and a little bit about our relationship. So I started in my yoga, and I focused on these guys. This was like my dad, my grandfather, my older brother, my brother-in-law. These are all guys that had definitely made an impression on me and helped me be the person I am today. So I looked at their faces, I heard their voices, I was thinking about things they said. And as I moved through 20, 25 different yoga positions, I just kind of ping-ponged from one to the other in no particular order, and little sound bites and things they had said that resonated with me. And before I knew it, 50 some minutes were done. I was in the final positions of my yoga practice. And I realized, wow, I kind of took myself to that zone. So, and now if I step out and I look at that, I think, yeah, that was kind of call it a spiritual goal. And if I look, just like Rob described that walking, this was an experience where, I had revisited these lessons and key moments from these men in my life. So that was kind of my mind. I had improved my physical health and worked on that, being better in my yoga practice. So my body, and I'd kind of filled my heart with the love that these men have shared me, and all of whom are no longer in the physical world here. So I thought, yeah, that's my mind, my body, and spirit. So that gave me a real good charge, for that day. And I think that's kind of what spiritual goals are about. They're more about being rather than doing. When we think of our mind and body, it's more focused on doing. When I think of these spiritual goals, activities, it's more about being, about that moment. So that's kind of my story. And I'll pass the baton over to Eileen. She's going to share some experiences about how her rowing has led her far past the competition and records and championships, and really developed into a lifestyle of goals. So Eileen, you want to introduce yourself and take it from there?
I do, but first I want to give you a nod for what a beautiful presentation that was. I was captivated, and I think you really, you give them applause. That really did summarize the topic that we're going with today, and I couldn't have said it better. So this is going to be the poor cousins approach here. Some of you know me. I'm Eileen Kilbane-Gordon, and I reside in Shaker Heights, Ohio. I'm a longtime friend for over 40 years with Rob Pasick and his wife. And we, as many of you know from the last platform of this topic a month ago, I talked about having set a fitness goal to become a rower. I went from an empty nest mother, boo-hoo, to a competitive masters women rower over a decade, and even on to 2021. So I've been asked to talk about integrating the goals that develop our mind, body, and spirit. And I just want to say, that my fitness goal of becoming an accomplished rower was just about rowing is to miss what a lifestyle change rowing and working out has meant for me, and means for others to begin a fitness goal and end up with multiple corollary goals being accomplished. So first I want to start with showing you a photo. This is rather large. I hope everybody can see it. But this is my first rowing team on the Cuyahoga River. I don't know, 22 years ago. And this is a group of women. I was on a women's team of 8, and we just joined for the fun of it, to get out on the water. It was a cool sport. We came from various backgrounds and various parts in Northeast Ohio, but that's at the end of one of our regattas where we had some fun and we put some garlands on our heads. We were called the Rowing Goddesses. And we had a sponsor for, that made our t-shirts, but we designed the t-shirts and we had a guy who was our coxswain. He was the only non-female member of the team. But that's how I started. I started rowing because I wanted to get stronger and healthier after falling away from competitive sports that I grew up with. I fell away because I was doing parenting and career, development as a pediatric nurse practitioner. And I had become a leader in my profession and as a clinician and a political lobbyist along the way. And I needed an outlet where I didn't need to be in charge of anything. I just wanted to follow and get some exercise and have some fun. So that was my initial goal. And I needed to just listen to the coach and follow exactly what the person in front of me was doing. Over time, I started to appreciate the nature on the Cuyahoga River where we rode. In the early mornings, we would see the blue herons, the Canadian geese, the ducks, the red-winged blackbirds, and tufted titmice. Any bird nerds out there know that these are grand sightings. And then, and then the evening rows, the sunset rows, where we would row under multiple bridges that would light up and sprinkle colors on the river. And then we'd see the sunset off to the west over the Lake Erie. So sometimes we rowed in silence, as sometimes the coach invites us to do, and you can actually hear the bubbles under the boat as you row, and you can hear the breathing and the movement of the oars, and it became almost like an in-zone moment, as Steve referred to, where you would feel in one with the other members of your boat. So we're transitioning from feeling like an individual doing something individual for ourselves. Now we're transitioning into the entire boat. 9 of us, including the coxswain, are moving together, and we're in silence and we're experiencing this beautiful natural scene. Even though it was a very physical exertion on our legs, our arms, and our core muscles, you would transcend above the worries of the day and the challenges of making a good living. And I felt spiritual in that I was one with nature and one with my teammates, and I was filled with gratitude. So it had always been a beautiful sport to watch. I don't know if how many of you have ever seen rowing on a river or yeah. And so it almost looks like a ballet, with the smooth and rhythmical movements, and it's graceful. It's not a collision or a contact sport or a high risk sport in terms of injury, but the feeling of connection that you make with your teammates and how each of us depend on each other to make the shell move. It felt like there was a micro community, a biome that we had created, and that we were synchronous, and how we felt each day coming into the row would influence how we performed. And so the importance of that spirit that each of us brought in, the attitude, was so critical. At one point, I had learned a trick from to demonstrate how that influence of that attitude goes through each of us as we're working together. I'd learned a trick to illustrate this technique. It was taught to me by a doctor who practiced holistic health. And in that, we gathered as a circle, the 8 of us, and the 9th was the coxswain, because that's the 9th rower. And we got in a circle, and we had one member go in the middle of the circle. And that member closed their eyes and extended their arms out. And then I would come up and I would ask all the members around me, I silently indicated to them to to make a frowning face. Really think angry thoughts, think just negative thoughts. And while they were thinking negative thoughts and the person in the middle had her eyes closed, I pushed down on the arm with just a moderate amount of strength, and that arm would go flat. It would go right down. We did that several times, right down. Then I asked the circle in a nonverbal way to think of positive thoughts, think of community, think of friendship, think of things that they're grateful for, and smile while they're doing it. Meanwhile, the person in the middle had her eyes closed, and I came up to her again, and I gave the same amount of pressure, and the arm would not go down. And what that demonstrated, and we did that several times, and we did it with different people in the middle of the circle. So what it demonstrated is that you affect other people with your attitude, and it's contagious. So with that, getting the right mindset is contagious and important for the community you're developing, which was part of my unknown at the time, but spiritual goals, where you felt connectedness. And I think that's that spirit Steve talked about, the feelings that make you value. And so your values and what your core things. So when I remember trying to prepare for a 2K, that's a 2-kilometer row, and I was feeling nauseous at the start line and nervous while waiting at the head of the Charles in Boston. And I was with my teammates, and I reminded myself that this is another goal, to dedicate your rows, much like Rob did when he was doing yoga and thinking of all the important men in his life. I had evolved into dedicating my rows to people who were important to me. And at that time, my 27-year-old nephew, Danny, was undergoing chemotherapy, very rigorous and toxic chemotherapy for stage 4 colorectal cancer. And so when I was nervous at the start line and we have to wait until our turn to come into the chute and take off, I thought about Danny, and I just closed my eyes and concentrated on him. And then the jitters went away, and I felt like, I can do this. If Danny can go through chemotherapy, I can do this. I can row this. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's going to be great. And so there you are. And Danny was standing over one of the bridges over the Charles River, waiting for our shell to come through. So it was extra motivation when I saw him there. So this is what happens. You can get over your doubts and worries about achieving your goals, your fitness goals, if you just realize, the first steps are hard to do, but if you can make some small goals and dedicate them to people who have had to go through more difficult things than yourself, in the end, it connects us to those we miss, we love, we're grateful to have known, and we can accomplish things with that in mind. In the past 5 years, I've battled cancer myself, ironically, skin cancer from too much sun exposure through my first 20 years of life. So how is that going to work with rowing in the outdoors? I had to adjust, as all of us have to adjust, to life curves that are thrown to us. So it took about 3 years off of my rowing life, and I had to go through intensive therapy myself, which left me unable to walk. And so one of the goals that I had for myself while I was in rehab, to learn to walk again. Can you imagine, something so basic as walking, I had to learn to do all over again. And it took 5 weeks in therapy. And I posted my goals up on my bulletin board next to my bed. And one of them was to be able to row again. And granted, that was a far off goal, but it happened. And and everybody who came into my room saw a picture of me rowing in a boat. And I said, my husband would say, she's a competitive rower. Don't underestimate her. She's going to get back. And sure enough, that happened. So that I'm almost 4 years cancer free now, and I have to report that I'm back to competitive rowing. The community that I left and I'm rejoining has been inspirational to me. They've helped me out. They've helped me in and out of the boat when I could barely move into it. I could barely bend. And now I'm strong again and practicing. We're soon to start our outdoor rowing season, but I've been doing my indoor rowing. So the way I like to look at this is that I adapt my role, my goals, just like all of us have to do when life gets in the way or comes up at you. And it is a lifestyle change, and it's one that I'm grateful for. It's become part of my identity. Everybody who knows me well knows I'm a rower, and frequently they ask me about it. And it's something that people like to talk with me about because they're so inspired themselves. I've had more than one people say, I want to do that. How did you do that? So it doesn't take a lot to do the first steps, and you don't have to have a total goal of being a competitive rower or competitive runner in mind, but or a triathlete like Brit is, but just know that whatever goal you set out, expect it to do something to your lifestyle and to integrate it with your body, your mind, and your soul. And that's it. Yeah.
Uh,
All right. Thank you, Eileen. Well, Britany, you're the anchor leg now.
Great. Those are really hard to follow. And even though I've heard some of these stories before, Steve and Eileen, I don't think I'll ever tire of hearing them. So I may call you up in the future when I need some more inspiration. I like the second session that we have talking about goals and the integration of goals across the different vectors of our lives, right? I should introduce, I'm Britany Affolter-Caine. My work life is that I am executive director for Michigan's University Research Corridor, which is an alliance of Michigan's 3 big research universities. My work is sometimes very isolating in that I'm deep into data and reports and that, but it's also heavy on relationship building. So it's a lot of people time. Which is good. And I've really missed that. Zoom just doesn't quite make up for lunch meetings with folks. So that's frustrating. But and then in my personal life, I'm the mother of 2 nearly grown and launched children who are in college, a senior and a freshman who are competitive Division III athletes at my alma mater at Wittenberg in Ohio. And my husband is a coach. He's actually off coaching right now, track and field. And so, our lifestyle has always been quite active, even though, my husband and I are no longer winning anything. We're not getting on the podium, even for age group awards. We're not competitive in that way, but we remain competitive with ourselves. So, and that's, I think, where I want to start is, why do I continue to do this other than it's part of my identity, but I've also recognized over I'm 46 years that if I were a dog, I'd probably be a border collie. I work really hard. I need to work. And if I don't, and if I have no purpose or direction, I become self-destructive and I'm going to ruin your couch. So, being active, not only in my brain, but also my body, is something that just has to happen for me to be balanced and for me to be productive and for people to like me. And so, I get asked all the time. I do train for triathlons because I can no longer do the hard day in, day out running. My body just can't take it. And as I've aged, this is part of the adaptation, right, to do triathlon. So when I was 40 as a birthday present to myself, I said, I'm going to do a half Ironman. And so I have done 3, usually every other year. COVID put a little stink in that. So I've gone 2 years without doing one, but I'm scheduled to do one in late June in Benton Harbor. So I'm not very good at it. I always pray that I'm going to make it in before I get, the sag wagon comes and gets me. And I get pulled from the course for time, but the thing that I actually love most is the training. And people ask me all the time, oh my gosh, that's so much training. How do you do it? And in reality, given, yes, I'm a busy person, but if I didn't dedicate, an hour a day to doing my own training, and sometimes it's 2 or 3, right? I would be no good to myself or anyone else. It is that time with myself that I work through whatever's on my mind. Sometimes it's personal, a lot of times it's work stuff. And whether or not I reach the zone or flow that Steve talked about, sometimes I don't, but at least it's dedicated time on my own to let my mind wander and find some solutions to things that are nagging me, or to even identify the things that are nagging me. So, in some of our initial titles for this second goal setting session, we thought about working out or working, what did we say, Eileen? It's working while working out, right? Eileen came up with that.
Working things out while working out.
Yeah, because that's what we do. And so I for me, the time, it's a gift, not a sacrifice. And I need to sometimes remember that when I don't want to go out and run. If I say, oh, I have to run 5 miles today. There's this young competitive runner from U of M who recently graduated and is now competitively running, but she's in med school. And I see her, before COVID. And I remember I saw she was on the treadmill, and I asked, how many do you have to do today? How many miles? And she said, no, it's how many I get to do. And so I think about that too and make that adjustment. So that is where I am today, but where did I start? And the truth was that once upon a time, I was a competitive athlete with others. I was a Division III track and field athlete, and I did high jump. And I will say, I probably, even though I did pretty well, I've made it to nationals once, qualified another time, but just missed the bubble. I was an 8-time all conference person. I placed in the top 3, 8 seasons, which is not always easy to do in the same event, but I did. I think I could have even been better, but I was a bit of a mental case. And this is where I want to go next. And just so you know where we're going, I am a firm believer that in sport, and when you push yourself and you go down the well, right, going hard, is a way for you to also not just work through problems, but to better understand yourself, because you are confronted with so many of your own baggage and challenges when you go down in that well and you're asking yourself to do something that normally you wouldn't have to work that hard. And for most of us, we have those things that we must learn and learn again and again and again. They're just our triggers, right? And so one thing, yeah, sure, it would have been great if I could have been even better than I was in college, if I had been able to master my mental stuff. High jump is one of those, there are lots of head cases among high jumpers. I'm not alone, because it's one of those events where, for those of you who may not know, you basically go until you fail, until you can no longer clear a height, which is mentally a little challenging, right? Plus, there's the fact that the bar is getting higher and higher, and as you're coming around and you dig down to do your jump, this thing is like at your eyeballs, right? Or sometimes it's above you. And so mentally, you're literally needing to jump your height, right? At some point. And so for me, that was a mental block. And I remember I couldn't identify with being someone who could jump a certain height, right? And I pretty much, I was a consistent jumper. I jumped the same year in, year out, but just breaking through was really tough. And so I started to realize, I was at a meet. It was a postseason meet, one of these last chance meets to make it for nationals at IUPUI. And I was there. I was one of the few Division III athletes. It was almost all exclusively Division I. And we had to postpone the event because we got a downpour. So I had to be huddled with all these other competitors, high jumpers in this tent who I didn't know. They weren't the usual people I saw. And they're complaining like they just want to get out of here. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, oh my gosh, if I were you, I would be so excited because you're going to win, right? And I remember being kind of angry. And anyway, clouds cleared, got the water off the high jump apron, and out we went. And I miraculously cleared 5.5, which was a first for me. The reason I realized I never wanted to clear it, because now I had to try 5.7, and 5.7, we go up by 2 inches, 5.7. And then after that, it's 5.9. And holy mackerel, that's my height. And I can't imagine jumping my height. So if I clear 5.7, I'm going to have to attempt my own height. And it was terrifying. I mean, that's sort of the root of most of our challenges is fear, right? And that was my fear. And I would get so far ahead of myself, I couldn't focus on what was in front of me. Now, my husband, who was not my husband at the time, he was becoming my boyfriend at the time, would be there with me and whispering in my ear and telling me, helping me with adjustments and things like that. And he could tell I was completely freaked out that I did 5.5, because now I've got to continue to go until, and he just said to me, finally, at one point, he just said, well, I'm not going to tell you what he said. It's a bad word. It's the worst word.
Go ahead.
Just forget about it. Basically, yeah, he just said, fuck it, go, just jump, forget about it. Right. And it just somehow released me to the point that I entered the zone and was almost having an out of body experience. And I just put my burden down and went with it. And that was a lesson that I have had to repeat in life. And to this day, oh, by the way, I did place in the top 3 there with all those Division I athletes.
Did you make
I
the 5.9?
know, it's like a pride point I will have for life.
Did you make 5.9, Britany?
I did not. I actually went out at 5.7, but what I learned was I was over it. I was just a hair clipped it. And that was like, I never even imagined I could do that. So from then on, I did pretty well clearing 5.5. It's not that I solved my, mental block, but at least I got much closer. And where I'm going with this is those are great glory day stories. But in my life, in every facet of my life, I sometimes run into that same challenge. That for me, getting to, I mean, I'm a planner. I am the queen of contingency plans. And I'm also usually 3 or 4 steps ahead of everybody else planning things out, which is great. The flip side of that is it can be debilitating too, to think, okay, if I get this job and then the next one, I'm going to have to do this, and then the next one, and then I don't know if I am really capable of that, right? You freak out. And so my husband now will, every now and then when I start getting into that cycle that is unique to me, and I need to relearn that lesson of to focus on what's in front of me and don't get so far ahead, he will say to me, hey babe, it's not 5.9, and I'm like, oh, right. Okay. I know what to do now. Right. I know what the path is once I realize I'm doing it. And sometimes you get real nervous before something and you just have to say, forget it. Right. Well, that's not what I say in my head, but it works. And just let it go. Sometimes once you've prepared, there's nothing else you can do. And that is, lessons I continue to learn repeatedly, and I learn through sport. And I think that's, for all of us, whether we're competitive in a competition or doing something we've not done before in our own lives, or pushing ourselves for some way. I mean, I think that is an advantage that we have as humans, to be able to cross our goals through multiple vectors of our life, to find ways to challenge ourselves and to learn those things that we need to learn and relearn. So that's my my take on it.
Very nice, Brittany. You know, it's funny being a
We got
track
another
athlete.
applause here, I think. For
Yes, absolutely. You know, I also being a track athlete for many years, but being a runner and never paying that much attention to the field events, I never thought of high jumping as that way that you described it, as it's an event that you go till you fail. Ultimately, you have to fail. That is kind of a unique aspect to that sport. One thing I picked up also from both Britany and Eileen sharing these stories is, and it's one of the things we talked about, are, do you need to achieve your goal for it to be successful or to be worthwhile? And as I hear Britany talk about, you know, it's the journey, like the training for the triathlon really is meaning more than the actual event. And when Eileen talks about reinventing her rowing, you know, when she has to go through this cancer treatment and learn to walk again, learn to row again, all of a sudden the championships and those things are not as important as the actual steps. And like I say, the journey of going through that. And I think that's important, but we don't get that journey if we don't have the goal. So that's the goal, and then sort of becomes our motivation, or the reason why Britany's gonna get up and do those 5 miles, or get on the bike and swim, or Eileen's gonna get out on a full day and learn to scull, to be a single rower. So I think that's an important thing to remember as we're looking at setting the goals in whatever part of our life they are.
Well, thank you. Oh, I'm basically a little emotionally shook up. Like Elvis says, I'm all shook up by what you guys say. How many of you know who Elvis is? But we'll go on. I don't want to know. But I want to give everybody a chance to share their own story, or to listen to other people who share their story. So Emily's going to take us into groups of 3, and we're going to basically devote the next 15 minutes, almost the end of this, to having people share their stories. So Emily, can you give us 15 minutes in a small group, which will give everybody about 5 minutes to either share the story or talk about your reactions to these amazing people's stories. And I just want to make a plug that we're going to offer an ongoing goal group for those that want to continue in this process. So please indicate on the chat if you'd like to participate moving ahead, and we'll probably do those as monthly goal meetings separate from Leaders Connect. But Emily, can you take us away into small groups, and we'll continue the conversation. Welcome back, folks. You can all unmute, and we're going to open things up. I'm going to ask Eric to just describe the last thing that he described in our small group, because I think if anybody is thinking it's daunting to run, Eric can give you some motivation.
Rob was asking me, I had been talking about some of the struggles I'd had when I was deployed to Iraq. At the end of my Navy career, I was mobilized with no notice and stationed with the Army's 18th Airborne Corps in Baghdad, both around the airfield and around the green zone. And so when I would run, I talked about how the stress of all that was because it was a pretty violent and pretty uncomfortable place to be. So I would run, and I ran more and more each morning until I was eventually running 6 miles. You wouldn't know it now. I've put on a lot of weight, but back then I was really fit I was talking about how much it meant to me to have to run every morning to sort of control that stress. And he asked, well, what was it like when you ran? And I said, well, you would run inside the base, but they would still shoot, right? So you would get shot at, and you would have these little warning systems. So you'd be running, and if they shot a rocket or a mortar, the radars, we really fancy technology. So we would track it coming up, and it would compute it very fast. It would know exactly where it was going to land. And then these alarms would start going off in that area. Ding, 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 incoming, take cover. And you had like 2 seconds to dive into a ditch or dive into the nearest pit. And so my runs in the morning would it literally happened multiple times. It would go off and I would dive down into the dirt, sitting sweating and all this dirt in my mouth, I'm like waiting, tick, 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 boom. And then, okay, now I can run again. So that was my little 2008 exercise routine. I'm glad I don't have to do that anymore.
So how did that incorporate mind, body, spirit, Eric?
Yeah, you had to spend a little time kind of chilling out after that. Yeah.
Who else would like to report on their small group? Just start talking. I can't see everybody, but just somebody take the mic and they can go.
Hey, Rob, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Jack. I was in a small group. I've got a new device and I couldn't figure out how to activate it. So on that, but I wanted to say that I was with Marilyn and Kevin, Marilyn Clark and Kevin Johnson, and I just want to thank them for their presentation. Did a wonderful job, and I appreciate it. I'm sorry I couldn't participate, but thanks.
Marilyn, you want to talk about what happened?
Well, I talked about how I've been a planner my entire life. When I was in my 40s, I put a life plan together from 40 till 65. Like my kids are in grade school, my kids are in middle school. What's happening with our finances? What happening getting them into college? So I'm a planner. But I indicated that going into retirement is a different kind of planning. You usually structure your life around your career. This is where you're going to live. This is what your finances look like. And retirement is a unique challenge. So when I retired, even where you live, we decided to move to Ann Arbor. And my son got married the year before. I ran into a great friend of mine who had just done the Camino in Spain. And I had read about it in my 30s. I absolutely always had it on my life goal. So I'm like, okay, I'm retiring. That's a good time to do it. So we came home and I talked 2 friends and another friend into training for this Camino. And last September, or the year before, so 2019, we walked 100 miles of the Camino along the Atlantic Ocean into Santiago. So I moved to Ann Arbor, and rather than taking in all these wonderful things that are going into Ann Arbor, I discovered every perk in Ann Arbor, getting myself up to 14 miles a day. And I'm not a runner, I'm not a rower, I've never been an athlete, but I've always exercised, and it was an amazing experience. We had wonderful bonding. We had to help each other. 2 of us got food poisoning along the way. So we had to help each other socially and medically to get through that. And I'll never take a cruise again.
That's great, Marilyn. And I have to ask you, how did you retire at 48? You look pretty young to be retired.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Anybody else want to report out? We're almost at the end time here. I don't know if anybody, we want to hear from any other group members.
I was going to say real quickly, my name is Corey, and I was with Steve, and I can't remember if it's Mithily is the other person. And just one of the, I think, best pieces of advice that Steve gave us in the last 2 seconds of our breakout was just get started with an exercise routine. Just get started. Don't overplan things. Don't overthink it, but just get started. So thank you, Steve.
Oh, you're welcome. And we did get cut off, and I was talking about how that idea of whether it's walking or rowing or swimming, whatever your activity is, that your first goal should just be about, just as the old Nike ad said, just do it. Just getting out and taking those first steps. And one of the things Corey mentioned, we were talking about during the pandemic, how he started walking, and what started, he and his wife starting walking just a little bit after dinner with their dog, ended up becoming, longer 4-mile walks or so, and things that have continued on. So that's really, you don't really need to worry about the end. It's just those first steps are just get out there and once around the block is better than no times around the block.
Well, Nancy, I see out there walking. Or Nancy, what are you doing? Unmute if you can. I can't hear you.
I'm out walking. You are absolutely correct. I am out. This is my morning walk time. And when you have ones that interest me, then I just take my headphones and I listen to you guys and I walk. And I've never done the small chats because it's kind of hard for me to walk and talk and chew gum at the same time. But this time it was a good one. So I thought, well, I'll stick around. And it was very enjoyable. Met two delightful people that had lots of inspiration with their talks and enjoyed listening to you and Britany and Elaine and kind of Stevie. I don't know. He was a little bit boring. Just kidding. He's my brother, so I can say that. But I must say, one thing that I think I might do now is down here in Louisville, there have been two women that have lost significant people in their lives. And so I've started walking with them separately and just to help them get out and just for support, having lost a husband. And I think listening to you, I'm thinking, wow, maybe I'm going to see if I can't start a little group and just, have a grief group that walks that, so anyway, so I thought that was kind of neat what you did and how I could integrate, the social support, the walking, and, sharing. So yeah, thank you for that idea.
Fantastic. Eileen and my wife, Patricia, are in another group that Eileen, could you just describe that pretty quickly? Because that's another example, I think.
Oh, well, I think over 25 years ago, Pat, Rob's wife, invited me to join a group of Ann Arbor women in hiking. And we would go to various locations in Kentucky, Tennessee, Michigan, and we would hike over Mother's Day. And we called ourselves the Mountain Mamas because we all were of that age. Just about all of us had children. If we didn't have humans, we had animals that were children. And we did a bonding and hiking talk, and we would work out our challenges at that age, whatever age range we were at. And in the beginning stages, it was early parenting years, and then teenage years, and then it became college years of our children and long lasting marriages, relationships. We would work things out, talk to each other. Some of us would walk 2 by 2 on the hike, and others would walk in a larger group, and we would assemble for dinners and live in the same lodge. COVID also kind of changed that, but we're hoping to get back to it this coming year and go back up to Michigan. But it was a support group in a way. And we also met the challenges of retiring and help see each other through those stages. So it was an idea that started with hiking and then grew to more than that. So
I think that's another beautiful example. So we're going to wrap up. Again, I encourage people to think about joining these goal groups. We don't have it organized yet. I'm one of these people like ready, fire, aim. So we'll make it happen as we go along. But please let me know if you're interested in that. And I'd like to hear your ideas about how we keep that going, whether it's a big group or a small group. But it's been really inspiring for me to hear these stories. I'm going to try to publish some of these stories Monday. So if you would like to share your story, send it in, and I'll be happy to just a paragraph or two, and send it in, and I'm going to put all these into my Dr. Rob newsletter on Monday. So please do. Nancy, I think I got to ask you one last question. Nancy, can you unmute?
Okay.
Yeah, how many hats do you have?
Oh, all the ones that he throws out, I get. So that means very few, very few, very few, very few.
So Michigan hats coming your way. Hey, Rob.
Yeah, Britany.
2 days.
In my group,
Perfect.
with Roger and Geraldine, there's the question of like, what kind of, are we on the same spectrum or not in terms of being motivated to get up and do exercises and things like that. I found this in my Apple feed this week through Entrepreneur, and granted, it's a little geared towards entrepreneurs, but I think it's related to a lot of us and all of us on this spectrum, right? No one really likes to get out of bed in the morning, myself included. Your problem isn't laziness, and to cut to the chase, it's fear of something. And so I put the link in the chat. I just think it might fit with some of our thinking on this, that, you know, transitioning from I have to do this to I get to do this, and how to get out the door. So
one last thing that reminds me of Steve and I are in a group where we shared this the other day. It was really interesting. What are your words of inspiration that you've used your life? You know, like what are the things? Mine is do the thing and you'll find the power, from Emerson. Or do the thing and you'll have the power, I guess is actually what I say. So, you know, that's the other thing you might share is, what are your words of inspiration that keep you going, get you out of bed in the morning, and get you on the machines that you work on, or the running or the pools. I know Jack is a swimmer. And, you know, what are those words? Hermelinda's a trainer. So what are the words that get you out of bed and keep you going through the fear? I think that would be really interesting to hear from all of you too. So thank you so much. I applaud everybody for their participation. I think this is one of the greatest events in the Leader Connect history. So very inspiring. And I have to ask everybody to please share what you're doing. Let us know how we can continue. So thank you very much for participating.